Hello everyone. I apologize for being away for a while, but a couple of things were going on in real life. An unexpected medical thing came up. I knew this was coming. I forgot to warn you. It's not cancer or anything, it's a genetic thing. But everything's good. Don't have to think about it for another 5 years. We're all good. I won't say any more than that for privacy reasons. Some good things have been happening in my job, but that took a little bit more time away from home than I was anticipating, so haven't been kicking around as much. And then in my free time I've also been teaching myself some things that will expand the variety of content that I can make. You may not necessarily notice a change. It's not in quality. The quality is going to remain about the same, but the variety of things that I can access has changed slightly, and will change over time as well. Whether or not you notice these changes is going to be entirely dependent upon your knowledge of what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to go into any more details for the surprise of it all. But with my return, I wanted to talk about an interesting change in America that a lot of people really don't like to talk about. The fact that America is not the meritocracy that it used to be, and that people really want to believe it is. Okay, now, just in case you didn't know, a meritocracy is a society in which, at least in theory, the most skilled and most intelligent are the ones that rise to power. Now, every society really wants to pretend it's a meritocracy. They really want to pretend that the people at the top have earned their way up there. But in most cases, not just in America, but in most countries, this is very much not at all true. It's particularly upsetting to certain types of Americans, though, because America has, to some extent, been built on the idea that it is a meritocracy, right? Which, again, never was true in the first place, but at the very least there was a certain amount of meritocracy in a younger America. Why is this? Well, because of two specific things that have happened over time and at different times in different places in America, and most countries again, where there was more to your position than just the money. What do I mean by that? Well, look at pre-internet society, right? Your social standing in your local community mattered. And with fewer companies kicking around hiring people and fewer higher level positions in your area a lot of the time, being in a high position meant something. My great-grandfather was the president of a bank. This wouldn't matter today, where bank presidents are a dime a dozen, but back then there was only like 2 banks in the town he lived in. So that was a pretty big deal, right? Nowadays we have a bunch of banks and we have managers that functionally operate the same way. Right, back then, the president of a bank was just the person who ran the bank. Below them, they would have the tellers and the accountants, and that was pretty much the bulk of it, right? There was less people involved, and while the position really had a good amount of social standing in terms of actual responsibility, it was about what you would expect of, say, a branch manager in a bank branch today. Right? Equivalent levels of power, really. But now, of course, every town has around a half dozen bank branches. So being a bank manager, which would functionally, again, be roughly the same position as a bank president 70 years ago, these all, have much less social prestige. And partially, as I mentioned earlier, this is because there's just more of them, right? There's, again, just tons of equivalent positions. Not just in banking, but in a variety of different industries. Being the manager of really anything is not that impressive, right? If you were to walk up to a stranger, introduce yourself, and specify you were the manager of such and such a place, the general response would be, "Oh, that's nice. What's it like?" The general polite curiosity kind of thing going on there. But way back, like a century ago, a century ago would be fairly accurate, being a bank president meant something. Being a bank manager even meant something back then, because there were just fewer, even though there was equivalent levels of power, there was just fewer of those, right? And again, your social standing in the local community mattered. So if you were able to work your way to one of these positions, you would achieve a certain level of social respect, social increase. And that was what drove what did exist of a meritocracy even back then. No, it wasn't exactly perfect. There would still be nepotism and whatever, but the combination of money, increased wages specifically, and an increase in social standing was a great driver for people to work to be promoted, to work to higher positions, right? Nowadays, that not only do we have more positions of equivalent power and the social standing is no longer existent, really, but people have also placed less importance on their local social standing. There might be some areas in which your position does affect your social standing. For example, if you're part of some religious community and your position happens to coincide with some specific set of values that religious community believes in, that would really increase your social standing. When I was younger, when I was a teen, there was a man in his, I would say, early 30s who was single, and he was quite the popular individual with the congregation ladies, because he was a police officer, and that really embodied what that congregation was, espousing as an example of that, right? In this particular case, it's more romantic than anything else, but he still got a lot of respect in that congregation for being an officer, right, as an example. And it really depends on, very specifically, what your social circle is in real life, assuming you have one. But people are increasingly finding their social circles online, and while, again, some positions are going to achieve an increase in your social standing online, these are significantly fewer. For example, you might garner some more respect out of an online community for being, say, a software engineer, because that matters to people online, whereas if you dropped that you were upper management at, say, a major chain, really wouldn't have a lot of impact in most internet communities. Maybe a couple, sure, but really whether or not your job matters to your online community really depends on what online community you're in, and most of the time it's not going to matter, right? Your real world job is not going to have any kind of impact on your online presence, because you could also be lying, right? But again, that's going to depend on your online community. But the local community's social standing really doesn't make an impact, so that sort of social reward for working your way up has disappeared. Furthermore, another thing that's affecting this is, quite honestly, again, related to the increase in managers and stuff like that. As businesses have expanded and as more businesses have cropped up, and the number of managers and the requirements for having managers have increased, the required need of managers, the standardization of training managers has increased. If you have any sort of business major, whether this is business management, finance, accounting, whatever, I don't care what your business-related degree is in, you've taken management courses. Because what college is also looking to do is prep you to not only start your career, but to theoretically advance in it. How effective that is really depends upon a variety of factors, but they're training you up to also be a manager, right? And that's very standardized. And one of the core tenets of managing is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In other words, if somebody is performing really well in a position, why would you promote them? They might not be as effective as a manager, and they're so effective at their current job, why would they bother promoting? This is why a lot of people claim that the best way to get promoted is to slack off, which isn't exactly true. You see, in order to promote, let me rephrase that, in order to be eligible for a promotion in a company, you have to manage your work ethic between two really specific levels of work. You have to work hard enough that you're not expendable and fireable, but you have to not work so hard that you are indispensable in that position. In other words, most managers put in middle-of-the-road effort, approximately, and are good at kissing ass. Or at least passively good at doing so. And these are the people that get promoted. This is why a lot of people talk about how useless their managers are. Because a lot of the times, their managers weren't the hardest working, but also weren't the laziest. They were somewhere in the middle. The only exceptions to these are due to nepotism, but that's a completely separate subject, really. So managers, the ones at least that were promoted not through nepotism, are not necessarily going to be the person with the most knowledge in the room. In fact, they often aren't. As a result of this, and they just keep on doing that. Someone who is really effective at managing their team also remains a manager of that team. They don't get promoted either. It goes all the way up through the line. As a direct result of this, CEOs are people who put in, frankly, middle-of-the-road effort. And this is true of most industries, and this is typically the background that a lot of politicians come from. When you hear about politicians talking about, what qualifies them to do whatever, they often rely on their experience managing this, that, and the other thing. This group of people in that company doing that kind of task, or whatever it is. A lot of them rely on managerial experience, and quite honestly, nowadays, that means they put in mediocre effort. And they're going to do the same damn thing in politics. This is why there are so many complaints about managers, and why a lot of managers seem really useless. It's not that they're completely useless, it's just that they're kind of useless in most cases, although there are obviously exceptions. Anytime you hear somebody praising their manager, make a mental note of that, because that manager will not promote. If that manager is doing a really good job as a manager of that group of people, their managers, the upper management of that company is going to see this effectiveness and is just going to keep that person there. Okay? So, ironically, if a manager is doing really well and their employees love that manager, chances are the manager is not moving up anymore. They're doing too good a job at their position. And their superiors aren't going to want to promote them for fear of the manager losing effectiveness in the new position. And this is what a lot of people get upset about, because there are a lot of people in the world that are managers. Let's be really honest. Tons of managers. As I just said before, there's just managers everywhere. You can't even spit without hitting somebody who manages something. Or someone, I guess would be a more accurate term. And CEOs really, really don't like this kind of thing being pointed out, because they really want to sell their worth on the idea that they've risen through the ranks and they've managed all these people and they've accomplished all these goals, and again, when you actually look at how one gets promoted in businesses, managers are the ones who put in that golden amount of effort that was low enough that didn't make them indispensable in their position, but high enough that it didn't get them fired. That's a pretty broad margin. And again, this extends to politicians who do the same exact thing as CEOs and stuff. Even putting nepotism aside, the people who put in the most work or have the most knowledge are not the ones who rise through the ranks. Which is fine if they like their job. If you like your job, put in as much effort as you can and go for the raises, go for the benefits. If you put in a ton of effort in your job because you like it and you don't get raises, walk away, because that company isn't appreciating you. A company can appreciate your efforts without having to promote you, right? In fact, this is how the more successful members of my family have gotten along. And there's a lot of benefits to that. Once you find a job you enjoy doing, decline promotions, because that's just more stress. Yeah, you get more money, but it's more stress, and you're not necessarily doing the work you like. In fact, often if you're promoted, you aren't. But anyways, once you find a position you like, just work really hard at it and go for the raises. Because if you express zero interest in promotions because you're happy where you are, management likes that because you're not competition, right? So, the smartest people find a career they enjoy and work really hard in it to become indispensable in that specific position, and just don't get promoted. They get raises instead. A lot of the more successful people I've encountered, either personally or through education, they've all run this. Okay? They all run this way. They found a job they really enjoyed doing, and they just stuck with that, and got plenty of promotions, benefits, the works. They didn't have to rise to a managerial position and be in the line of fire when something goes wrong. They didn't have to be on call more often because they weren't managers. Things like that. At the end of the day, America is not a meritocracy. You do not advance through extreme effort. You advance through middling effort. And people will also often throw out names like Jeff Bezos or a lot of times Elon Musk. But Jeff Bezos did not become CEO because he rose through the ranks or that he did something particularly impressive. Jeff Bezos had at least the intelligence and foresight to recognize a market, an untapped market, which was basically an online library type service where you could rent books and stuff. If you look into the history of Amazon, it's very interesting. But he recognized this niche, and he started a business in it, and then he did the most basic business advice in the history of business. He expanded. When you succeed in business, you expand. First rule of business. First thing you learn in business, a lot of the times. If your business course knows generally what they're doing. Is everything going well? Expand. It's very basic business. Jeff Bezos did not do anything more genius than recognize a unique business opportunity. Everything after that was bog standard business decisions. Amazon did not grow because Jeff Bezos is a genius. Jeff Bezos might have had a flash of inspiration, but the rest of it was pretty standard business decisions. Nowadays, he's the world's richest simp, but that's a conversation for a different time. Same thing with Elon Musk. He really wants to talk about how he built up PayPal and he was, there at the beginning. No. He bought into the company that wound up becoming PayPal, and sold it off when it became PayPal. Right? PayPal or eBay, I can't remember off the top of my head. Pretty sure it was PayPal. Let me quickly check this. Yeah, it was PayPal. I was correct. He just invested in it. He didn't actually build it up. He just threw money in and pulled money out when it was time to sell high. Same thing with most of his businesses. He didn't work his way up into any of these. He's bought in. That's it. And this is why a lot of decisions by management of companies seem really stupid. Frankly, they are. These are, again, people who have middling knowledge, on average, have put in middling effort, on average, and don't know entirely what they're talking about, even though they'd like to pretend they do. But I just wanted to talk about that really quickly as a sort of returning video. With that being said, thank you very much for joining me for this slightly shorter episode. And if you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.